Merci. Je voulais commencer quand même par remercier en notre nom
And I also wanted to thank everyone on our behalf, Stephanie, Jean, Guillaume, the family, and all the team for this harmonious and so beautiful location, which is now right in the eye of the geopolitical storm. Thank you, Law, for the very rich discussions, and thank you for inviting me to conclude and to do the easiest task of summarizing 2 days worth of discussions in just 10 minutes on the transatlantic relations. Thank you very much, Law. I consider it to be a proof of your friendship. Great. Okay, let me confess first, because it's the very first time I'm here, and I expected to have a long list of quotes of Tocqueville, and we have a list of quotes, and I was a tad disappointed because we heard a lot of quotes from Montaigne, from Napoleon, Bismarck, and actually until the end of the panel, I listened to Donna Brazil, and I think Nicola Tanzer were the only to quote Tocqueville. So as Tocqueville say, what is the most difficult to understand and to appreciate what's happening in front of our eyes, and we are the true witnesses because that's why we're here for. I want to share my thoughts about and my opinion on everything we discussed, but I wanted to share with you what struck me and what I will remember from these 2 days, even though I'll try to focus on three main ideas and a few questions. The first strong point is that America and in Europe are drifting apart, and Nicolas Bavaris highlighted the change, the shift in America. The withdrawal of America is leaving the EU helpless, and they lost a daddy. So, but they also triggering their will to be more ambitious. And Pascal Bruckner often said the Europe is supporting the pessimism in the changes, and Europe regulates, and China is copying. Europe is like a mistreated child, but they think that America will regret this. And every more I'm saying, Trump may make a mistake. It was a true strong point for the US to dominate such a country. If you are fully independent, we no longer need to be in line with the US. But is it truly the end of this domination? We saw in the last few days that Trump enjoyed the submission of the other NATO members. Let's make sure that it doesn't become a Warsaw Pact. And just remember the Warsaw Pact is the only organization which were in a fight with all the members. If we buy European, Trump may be disgruntled, but so be it. And the main question is how can we make sure that Europe can become a superpower? And you heard about rearming, but it wouldn't be enough. We need to have the necessary tools for political power, and this is a huge task awaiting us. But I will agree with Benjamin Haddad. Should we give the Charlemagne Prize for the best European of the year to Donald Trump? And the second idea is Trump is not the problem. And we learned previously that thanks to Declan Gilley that Donald Trump was actually Italian, from Sicily, from Calabria, and the only word that wasn't said was mafia, but that's it. So Declan will follow your advice and maybe change our accent so we understand him better. And I was struck by the gap of perceptions between the Europeans and the Americans when it comes to Trump. Contrary to us, they consider completely normal. Donald White told us Trump is a pragmatic, and they told us that he won't be here forever. And Joshua Mitchell say the Democrats similar to John Fitzgerald Kennedy, getting rid of culpability, guilt. But I think it's a result of normalization of Donald Trump, even though no one really seems to understand where America is currently standing, and we asked a question during one of these panels. Our American friends don't seem to pay attention or to care. No one asked how they were neglecting the laws and what will be the next law he will break. Will he agree to leave in 2028? The collaboration of the Supreme Court. Is it a cause of worries for them? But no one talks anymore. Why should it stop here? We didn't talk that much about this, but I think there's some kind of a mirror between the way the rule of law is decreasing in the US and the way the international law is decreasing. And Andrea Bianchi also mentioned the Guantanamo camp, a law, no man's land, visited twice. And what if Guantanamo was actually a virus was spread in the world? And the third idea is that the threat is everywhere, but there's no certain defeat. Just look at Ukraine. Better Hermier said we are in a world at war, and the domination of three empires, China, Russia, and the United States, is no longer a question of getting back to business as usual. And I would remember all your partners, all your Chinese partners are spies. We just have to know this. While facing Russia, Nicolas Tenzer reminded us that we are at war too with Russia, and we have a disagreeing point for Hervé Morin. It's not an existential threat, and it's a joke to imagine that the Russian tanks will arrive to Paris. And Mr. Segov say he represents Russia, he represents entire Europe, and they named Václav Havel. Is that the problem with Russia? They don't have borders, and they added that Russians don't make a difference between the nation and the empire. Sorry, I've lost the page I was reading. I also wanted to mention a missing link. What is the engine behind the relationship between Putin and Trump? One of them considered to be a popular catharsis, and the other one was considered to be a metamorphosis of the Russian Empire. What is the link? What is the connection between these two men? It may be a good point to discuss during the next edition of these discussions. I think Alexandra Maciviuk said that she brought back to the fundamentals. The collapse of the international law was preceded by the collapse of morals. It's important to put the human at the center and the people first, and not US first. And Andreas Kubilius reminded us, rightfully so, what Ronald Reagan said: freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And I think Pascal Bruckner has the most Tocquevillian phrase: the best ones in democracy are those who bring humanity into a new adventure. What else to add? Jean-Guillaume Tocqueville invited us to appreciate once again dialogues, and I think the mission is accomplished.
Good afternoon to all. I'm going to be speaking in English today. So my name is Lucy Reed, and I thank you for the opportunity to close this year's Tocqueville Conversations with you. As I begin, I would like to start with a quote from an author akin to de Tocqueville's understanding of democracy as tethered to equality. Ta-Nehisi Coates remarked, quote, "You cannot act upon what you cannot see, and we are plagued by dead language and dead stories that serve people whose aim is nothing short of a dead world. And it is not enough to stand against these dissemblers. There has to be something in you, something that hungers for clarity. And you will need that hunger, because if you follow that path, soon enough you will find yourself confronting not just their myths, not just their stories, but your own." As someone who is both Finnish and American, I've spent these past 2 days thinking about what it means to hold both passports, and to specifically speak to you today from the perspective of a young American student and also an advocate and human being. These conversations we have had are urgent. They struggled with the future of democracy and are asking the fundamental question of how did we get here and what do we do next? We have explored both the MAGA revolution and Russian revisionism against the broader themes of polarization, disenfranchisement, and questions on security and democracies. From influential speakers such as Mirjana Spojarek, the president of the Red Cross, debates on where Trump is taking America with powerful figures including Donna Brazile and Joshua Mitchell, to discussions about security in Europe entangled with the inherent duties of international law with Kenneth Roth and Alexandra Matvichuk. There is no doubt that we as members of nations and of this shared earth are wondering about a collective solution for all citizens against a backdrop of spite and fear. And there is indeed much hope. Yet I am still left with a heavy feeling of dissonance. Because from where I stand, it is not just that democracy is threatened in America. It is for many communities, Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and poor, that democracy has never even been fully realized. These issues are not abstract, but ones which millions of Americans live with daily. The Trump administration is a symptom of forces long at work, those of racism, economic injustice, and nationalistic isolationism. And not only is democracy simply weakened by coups or foreign interference, it is eroded by neglect, by silence, and by those we choose to see and those we don't. Thus, we need spaces such as these conversations to discuss all sides, opinions, and experiences of the demos. Through this process, we cannot forget the inherent dignity of all. This selective vision will always undermine democratic rule. I noticed how often we return to Ukraine, and rightfully so, as a test of Europe's commitment to international laws and the values of democracy, that of human dignity most importantly. Yet I heard little attention paid to Palestine, an ongoing humanitarian crisis and genocide, or to that in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or to Sudan and many other unseen crises throughout the world. If we are going to speak about rule of law, human dignity, and the defense of free societies, we cannot exclude the places where those values are being violated daily, especially when these violations are funded, excused, and often ignored by very countries gathered here. If we talk about international law and democracy for some, we risk losing the moral and ethical authority we demand for all. As an American, I carry with me not only the urgency to resist the Trumpist and MAGA threat, but also the responsibility to name the contradictions in our own democracy, as we have done throughout these conversations, and to push for a vision that includes everyone. Now leaves the question of what can be done. Many panelists called for securitization, looking at defensive strategies due to a vulnerability of Europe, both from external pressures and internal democratic erosion. Yet Europe is not simply vulnerable because they do not put enough money in defense, but rather because they rank the value of a life internally and abroad. We need selfless service to the world, as a notable speaker echoed yesterday. The way that I would phrase such a call is to ask each of you to reflect deeply upon what sacrifice you are willing to make for those who have no voice. History will indeed show the jury was never out for Trump, just like it was never out on any of the other autocracies that have injured the universal call to the equal value of every human being. So as I close, I return to that hunger for clarity. I believe clarity doesn't come from defending abstractions. It comes from radical honesty, from widening our field of vision, and from centering justice, not just for the US, not just for Europe, but for the whole world. As someone giving the American perspective, I would like to paraphrase President Abraham Lincoln's words at Gettysburg. Here I plead with each one of you, and collectively in solidarity to resolve, that the victims of Ukraine and Palestine and the Congo and Sudan and all other atrocities in the world have not died in vain. In both our agreement to democracy and duty to speak out for all peoples in our studies and through our actions, we can make good on that promise. Europe's moment in the world is this just as much as everything else we've discussed. Thank you.
Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, I will speak in Tocqueville language, in French. I cannot start without saying thank you. Thank you to Jean-Guillaume, to Stephanie, and to the whole family of Tocqueville. Thanks to Laure Mandeville, Corinne Nassif, and the entire team making the conversations possible. And it is necessary. So today, I'm speaking as a student of the College of Europe, an institution that was born from the willingness to rebuild Europe after the ruins, after the war. Bernard Cazeneuve reminded us that peace is at the roots of the European project, and in Bruges, but at the College of Europe campus and in Tirana as well, we have lived through the European spirit, not with our passports, but with the daily effort of sharing our thoughts with my dear colleagues. I would like to start with an anecdote. The first ever person from my promotion that I have had the luck to know, I met him here in Tocqueville a year ago. So this meeting turned into a great friendship for years to come. And this says a lot about Tocqueville, which is a place for conversations, and the college is as well. And I think Tocqueville's spirit and the college's spirit have something in common. A certain idea of freedom, the idea that freedom can be learned. As Tocqueville said, to quote him, there is nothing more fecund than the art of being free, but there's nothing harder than learning how to be free. And this is what Europe is going through today, a learning phase faced with history. I can't share with you everything I've learned in these past 2 days, but I have seen a clear observation is that Europe is going through a Hobbesian moment, especially yesterday. We've been reminded with Oleg Dugda that Russia is threatening Europe with revisionism on the eastern flank. And we've already talked a lot about the transatlantic side with Lucy. Nicolas Denezer told us today as well, after the last roundtable, that not only are we facing a war with Ukraine, but also against the principle of law, a war from within, with threats on our freedoms. The best way to face these challenges is to keep Michel Barnier's optimism. Europe has gone through several crises, but always came out stronger. This time, we've got a recipe from Mr. Kubilius to make sure that Europe's moment for democracy is also Europe's moment for its defense. However, the barriers that were mentioned was fear. And personally, after 3 years of studying in France and Belgium, I will go to Ukraine in just a few months. And when I'm asked, is it scary? Yes, it's a little scary. But in war times, I suppose it's quite normal. But it's more about finding a way to turn this fear into something constructive. And I will end with the conviction of my generation. The European democracy, as Tocqueville understood it, is difficult, never achieved. It needs to be firm, it needs courage, and to have conversations such as this one, not to stay in fear. So thank you for this moment of collective learning, and it's up to us to extend this freedom, which is hard and fecund. Thank you.